Man, Fountainhead Palace is just such a gorgeous area. It's gotta be one of the prettiest places I've ever seen in a video game. I mean, just look at this place. I could just sit here for... You know, on second thought, Senpo Temple is lovely this time of year.
Sekiro is a video game. Some might say that it is a difficult video game. Some might even go so far as to say that it is an unfair video game. So how do I respond to such criticism? It depends on what you like. Now, I love Sekiro. It's easily in my top 5 video games that I have ever played. So why do I like it so much, you might ask? Easy. The gameplay. What may come as a criticism from a lot of From Software or other Souls-like fans is the lack of build variety present in Sekiro. People like figuring out their own unique damage profile, customizing their gear, being able to grind for levels when they get stuck, and playing in a style that fits what they enjoy or how they envision their self-insert protagonist. Sekiro doesn't have that. It has a few customization options with the skills, prosthetics, and ninjutsu abilities that you collect throughout the game, but at its core, Sekiro really just has 2 buttons: attack and parry. While some find this boring, I believe that it makes the combat in Sekiro some of the most perfectly balanced of any game that I have ever played, and I have 100%ed a fair share of quote-unquote difficult games. I get that some people can't seem to get a hang of the gameplay, and as a result, they had a bad playing experience with Sekiro. And while that's unfortunate, unless you're a games journalist, in which case, it's hilarious, it is also true that some people are just better or worse at certain styles of games. For instance, I'm terrible at sports games, platformers, and first-person shooters, and so I hardly ever play them. There are a few that sometimes look interesting, and I may try for a little bit, but at the end of the day, I recognize that I'll probably end up wasting a lot of time and frustration trying to play something that I'm not really going to enjoy. For example, I think that Doom looks amazing, but I recognize that it's not designed for me as a gamer, and so I stick with what's fun to me. Now, what is fun to me is pulling off a near flawless fight in a back-and-forth dance with one of the many well-designed bosses in this game. It's about reading the tells before each attack to time your parries or get in that free hit. Once mastered, each fight becomes almost like a Guitar Hero game. It's about pressing the correct button at the correct time with as few mistakes in the middle as possible. I don't consider myself to be a pro gamer or anything like that, but humble brag, I have completed this game on New Game Plus 7 with the Bell Demon and no Kuro's Charm, and let me tell you, the difference between New Game Plus and that maximum difficulty is really not that bad. The combat system in Sekiro gets a solid rating from me of learning how to ride a bike. It takes a bit of practice at first, but once you figure it out, you're not going to forget how to do it, and you're going to have a ton of fun. Now, I just got done telling you about how good it feels to go blow for blow with all of the fantastically designed bosses in this game. All 17 of them. 20 if you count the inner versions in the boss refight mode. Now I might hear you say, 17? Why, that's quite a decent number of hardy foes to face. And you would be correct, if 6 of them weren't repeats and 1 of them wasn't folding screen monkeys. Which is a real shame because nearly all of these bosses are fantastic. Owl Father and Genichiro, the second time you face him, are my personal favorites. The boss repetition is a shame too because Sekiro is a fairly short game compared to some of the other more expansive From Software titles like Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, and obviously Elden Ring. One plus side is that each repeat does offer, at a minimum, a new phase to the fight, as well as typically introducing some new moves. So while it's not an exact copy-paste, it still feels a little disappointing to meet a boss at the start of a new area that's just a souped-up version of one you've already clowned on. But that's okay. There are plenty of mini-bosses around the world that are also bound to give you a good fight. 37 of them to be exact. Now I might hear you say, 37, why, that's quite a decent number of hardy foes to face. And you would be correct, if 20 of them weren't repeats and 1 of them wasn't Miss Noble. Unfortunately, unlike the bosses, the vast majority of these refights are just carbon copies of the original fight, sans a handful of exceptions that add unique moves. Lots of games will take early minigame bosses and just reuse them as standard enemies later on as the game scales into the late game. But Sekiro not only reuses the exact same mini-boss fights at every point in the game, but they even give them unique names despite the fact that it's clearly the same guy. I know that's you in there, Juzu. Unfortunately, the only real fix to the boss repetition issue is to either remove the repeated bosses or to replace them with brand new fights, which I understand would take more development time. But outside of the lore reasons, do I really need to face Juzu twice in the exact same spot? Or do I need to deal with the false monk and then the true corrupted monk literally 5 steps further down the path? I think that with the quality of the bosses in this game, I'd even be okay with a few less impressive fights rather than facing the same boss multiple times. Just let me know how you guys feel about that in the comments. As far as the bosses are concerned, I'll rate them like going trick-or-treating and only ever getting your favorite candy bar. It's super great at first until you get sick of eating the same thing over and over again and it no longer becomes special. Also, that lady who gave you a toothbrush and an apple, that's Folding Screen Monkeys and Miss Noble. You know what? I just said that we were done with bosses, but just like the hidden ones in Sekiro, there's still more to deal with. Namely, the Demon of Hatred. If you can rewind your brain about 4-ish minutes ago, I was talking all glowingly about how perfectly crafted all of the bosses in this game are for its core mechanics. Well, there is one glaring problem. And by glaring, I literally mean that in both the too bright to look at and the angry scowl sense. I mean, just look at this lad. Demon of Hatred, for those not in the know, is an optional hidden boss at the end of the game. But oh boy, is it a good thing that he's optional. Not because he's hard, mind you, but because he's hard because he doesn't play like any other boss in the game. Demon of Hatred plays like he belongs in Bloodborne 2, and is angry about being in Sekiro instead. So what makes him so different? Simple. He's a big monster, not a samurai or a ninja. The only other boss with a playstyle in the same ballpark as Demon of Hatred is Guardian Ape, and only then it's in his first phase. While you can use the parry mechanic against Demon of Hatred like any other enemy, it's much more reliant on dodges and jumps to avoid damage, and just slowly chipping away at HP rather than breaking posture. This is pretty much the opposite of all the other boss fights in the game. So how could this fight be improved? A small lore spoiler ahead if you care. Alright, everybody gone? Good. My suggestion? Make Demon of Hatred a demonic version of the Sculptor in his prime. Not only would this make the lore connection easier for casual players to notice, but it would make the fight almost play out like a Dark Link fight from The Legend of Zelda. Similar to Sekiro becoming consumed by Shura in the bad ending, have the Sculptor become a demonic and fiery version of his past life. When you use your prosthetic tool in the Owlfather fight, he mentions his familiarity with the prosthetic, meaning that you, the player, fight similarly to the Sculptor back in the day. I think this would balance the fight much more to the regular playstyle of Sekiro, as well as making the fight more impactful to the player and not feeling so random. But instead, we've got a discount Balrog with a twisty straw for an arm. So for that reason, there really is only one way to beat him. Cheese him off a cliff by getting him stuck in a tree. If the other bosses are your favorite candy on Halloween, then Demon of Hatred is the Easter egg that your parents hid on Easter that didn't get found until a week later, and now all the chocolate is melted all over the place. Gross. On the subject of things that don't really belong in Sekiro but belong in Bloodborne instead, there's the Terror status condition. In a game based around attacking, parrying, and dancing back and forth with a foe to see who blinks first, From Software thought it was a good idea to add an unblockable status condition that when fully stacked just straight up kills you. No 75% damage like Frenzy, just instant death. At least Sekiro does have the revive mechanic, which means that this status isn't an instant failure, but it does make the Shichiman warriors one of the worst mini-bosses in the game. All 3 of them. I didn't play Sekiro to play a bullet hell From Software. I don't even really have a good replacement for this outside of just removing it. Maybe make it stun Sekiro so that the enemy can get a strong attack in if you're not careful, or something along those lines. But I'm calling the terror mechanic what it is. It's like getting your credit card declined while you're shopping. You really should know that it's coming, but you still die inside every time it happens anyways. Remember at the start of this video when I mentioned how Sekiro had some customization options? Well, now I get to do a callback to that and talk about them. And by talk about them, I mean to mention how they're basically completely optional. The biggest customization option in Sekiro is the prosthetic tools, a series of different tools, abilities, and attacks that you collect throughout the game and can upgrade to give different elemental effects or to just be stronger in general. It's a pretty cool feature, and with all the different options, I think it deserves a song. Whoa, what, do I sound like the other guy to you? Let's get out of here. Prosthetics are indeed a super cool feature though, and make Sekiro feel like a living Swiss Army knife. But the truth is that most prosthetic tools are never used. The same can be said too about all the skills and ninjutsu abilities that you collect throughout the game. There's about a handful of all 3 of these options that I find myself using in a playthrough, and even then most of that is just a one-off for a specific fight. use shurikens for the owl fight for when he tries to remove posture, or the lady butterfly fight when she's on the ceiling, use the spear and the headless ape fights to pull out the centipede, use leaping kicks for Genichiro's sweep attack, and the blood smoke and puppet ninjutsu for a few gank fights to even things up. Which is a real shame because these things have the potential to lead to some really interesting combos. Go and watch Ongball on YouTube if you want a showcase of all the awesome things that you can do when you combine everything together. Unfortunately, the average player just isn't going to do that. A normal playthrough really just needs firecrackers and Ichimonji double, and that's literally it. Just unlock those two and 90% of the game is going to play out the exact same. My suggestion for this problem is to simply make the uses of these abilities to pay off more, or make it more clear when they should be used. I bet some of you just learned that you can use the spear in the ape fight. Why? Because despite the fact that I don't want the game to hold my hand, I would like it to be intuitive enough where I can realize, hey, this might be the right time to use this. These things don't have to be overpowered, but if I knew that setting up a bestowal ninjutsu before a fight would absolutely destroy whoever I'm fighting, I'd be way more incentivized to set it up in the meantime. I'll rate the customization options in this game like giving your parents a gaming computer. There's lots of potential in there, but they're just gonna use it for Excel and Facebook anyways. On the subject of things that are kinda pointless, the consumable items in this game are also generally unhelpful. The main consumables in this game are the sugars, which boost a particular effect on Sekiro for a limited time. The damage sugars and stealth sugar can be very useful, especially the stealth one on a number of situations. The damage reduction and posture reduction sugars though? No. The fact is, if you're struggling enough in a fight to have to use one of these sugars, then you're never going to win the fight to begin with. Because of the back and forth nature of the combat system in this game, getting hit and taking on posture damage means you're not dealing damage and posture back. And if you're not doing that, then the fight is just going to end up taking longer, you're going to end up getting hit more anyways, and you're still going to die. Maybe some of you out there have found success using these or combined them with the damage sugars to become an absolute unit, but for me personally, I don't even think I've ever used them. Speaking of things that I've never used, don't even get me started on the Gourds. Great Divine Dragon are these things useless. If you haven't seen Limit Breaker's video on these things, go watch it. They do nothing. Literally, all they do is stop the buildup. They don't even remove the status condition. So the only time that you use them is while you're still healthy. And once you realize how expensive they are, what a scam. You hear that, Pot Noble? I'm gonna feed you to the carp that you wish you were, you spindly little piece of